My stepdaughter tearfully told her father I refused to buy her a prom dress after ruining her perfect one. He yelled at me for an hour about being jealous of a teenager. I stayed silent, but this morning I showed him the security footage of her cutting up the $600 dress I bought her last week, then texting friends that her evil stepmother would pay. She has no idea what's waiting for her behind her bedroom door. I never imagined being a stepmother would be easy, but I certainly didn't expect it to be this hard. I married David 3 years ago, becoming stepmom to his daughter Chloe, who was 15 at the time. Her mother had moved across the country for a new relationship when Chloe was just 7, maintaining contact only through occasional birthday calls and holiday cards. I knew stepping into this situation would be challenging, but I loved David and genuinely wanted to be a positive presence in Chloe's life. From our first meeting, Chloe made it abundantly clear that she didn't want me around. I understood her hesitation. I wasn't trying to replace her mother, just hoping to be a supportive adult figure. I approached our relationship with patience and low expectations, figuring we'd build trust gradually. "She just needs time," David would say whenever I expressed concern about Chloe's coldness toward me. "She's been through a lot with her mom leaving." I believed him because I wanted to believe that time would heal whatever wounds were causing Chloe's hostility. And occasionally, it seemed like we were making progress. She'd share a story about school drama or ask my opinion on an outfit, but these moments were invariably followed by closed doors and cold shoulders, as if she'd suddenly remembered she wasn't supposed to like me. David struggled with the situation more than he admitted. He worked long hours as a civil engineer, leading Chloe and me to navigate our awkward dynamic alone most weekdays. When conflicts arose, he tended to minimize them, typical teenage stuff or just a phase, rather than addressing the underlying issues. I understood his position was difficult. No parent wants to be caught between their child and their spouse. So I tried not to push or complain too much, hoping things would improve naturally. Our household fell into an uneasy rhythm. I handled most of the day-to-day parenting tasks, making sure Chloe had lunch money, checking that her homework was done, driving her to volleyball practice, while David took the role of weekend fun dad, taking her shopping or to movies. It wasn't ideal, but it was functional, and I told myself that was enough. Then prom season arrived this spring, Chloe's senior year. Despite our challenging relationship, I was genuinely excited for her. High school hadn't been easy for Chloe socially. She had friends, but wasn't part of the popular crowd, and she'd experienced her share of teenage girl drama. When she was asked to prom by Tyler, a boy she'd had a crush on for months, I was thrilled for her. "We should go dress shopping," I suggested one evening after Chloe mentioned needing to find something to wear. "I could take you this weekend if you want." I expected immediate rejection, but to my surprise, Chloe agreed. "The good stores are at Westfield Mall," she said, not looking up from her phone. "We could go Saturday." That Saturday shopping trip was one of the best days we've had together. We visited 6 different stores, and Chloe actually seemed to value my opinion, asking what I thought about different styles and colors. When she tried on an emerald green dress at our final stop, we both knew immediately it was perfect. The color complemented her hazel eyes, and the cut was sophisticated without being too mature. "You look beautiful, Chloe," I said sincerely as she examined her reflection. For once, she didn't deflect the compliment or roll her eyes. She just smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, and said, "I think this is the one." The price tag showed $600, significantly above the $350 budget David and I had discussed. But seeing Chloe so happy, experiencing what felt like a real bonding moment between us, I made a spontaneous decision. "Let's get it," I said. "It's perfect for you." "Really? It's a lot more than Dad said we could spend." "It's a special occasion," I replied, "and you only get one senior prom. I'll cover the difference." To my absolute shock, Chloe hugged me in the store, our first real hug in 3 years of living together. "Thank you, Kate," she whispered. I paid for the dress with my personal credit card, not mentioning the price difference to David. It felt important to keep this moment between Chloe and me, a small secret that was just ours. As we drove home with a carefully bagged dress hanging in the back seat, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps this was the turning point I've been waiting for. Last Tuesday, I came home early from work with a migraine that had been building all morning. As I passed Chloe's room on the way to get my medication, I heard her voice through the partially open door. She was clearly on a video call, not realizing I was home. "Actually worked," she was saying with a laugh. She totally fell for the whole bonding over prom dress thing. You should have seen her face when I hugged her. Like she'd won the lottery or something. I froze in the hallway, the throbbing in my head momentarily forgotten. "How much did she end up spending?" asked the voice from Chloe's computer. $600, Chloe replied proudly. "Way more than Dad would have spent. But she's so desperate for me to like her. It was easy." The familiar ache of rejection bloomed in my chest, sharper than my migraine. I should have continued to my room, taken my medication, and process this information privately. But something kept me rooted to the spot, listening to my stepdaughter mock my attempts at connection. Anyway, I have something even better planned, Chloe continued. Watch this. There was a sound I couldn't immediately identify, then a gasp from whoever was on the other end of the call. What are you doing? Creating a little drama, Chloe explained cheerfully. I pushed the door open wider to see Chloe sitting cross-legged on her bed, a pair of scissors in her hand, deliberately cutting a jagged line across the bodice of the green dress we purchased just days earlier. What are you doing? I gasped, unconsciously echoing her friend's question. Chloe's head snapped up, her expression shifting from shock to calculation so quickly it was unsettling. The tears that suddenly welled in her eyes seemed to appear on command. Get out of my room, she shouted. You can't just barge in here. You're destroying your dress, I said, still trying to process what I was seeing. The dress I just bought you. Whatever, she snapped, ending her call. It's just a stupid dress. You can buy another one. Isn't that your whole thing? Buying my affection? The casual cruelty of her words, paired with the deliberate destruction of something that had represented a rare positive moment between us, left me speechless. I turned and walked to my room, took my migraine medication, and laid down in the dark trying to make sense of what had just happened. Later, I heard Chloe leave for her evening shift at the local cafe. I still hadn't decided how to handle the situation when David came home around 7. I thought about telling him what had happened, but something held me back. Maybe it was the migraine still lingering at the edges of my consciousness, or maybe it was the knowledge that confrontations about Chloe never went well. So I said nothing, just mentioned I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. What Chloe didn't know, what neither she nor David knew, was that we had security cameras in the house. David had installed them last year after a series of break-ins in our neighborhood. There was one in the upstairs hallway with an angle that included part of Chloe's room when her door was open. The cameras were primarily for when we weren't home, and we'd always respected Chloe's privacy, but the system had captured the entire incident. I hadn't checked the footage yet. Part of me hoped I had somehow misunderstood what I'd seen, that there was some explanation other than deliberate cruelty. But I knew what I'd witnessed, and the memory of Chloe's calculated tears when caught kept replaying in my mind. The next morning, Chloe left for school without speaking to me, which wasn't unusual. I had a flexible work-from-home day scheduled, so I made coffee and sat down at my laptop, finally ready to address what had happened. I accessed the security system and found the footage from the previous afternoon. It was all there in high definition. Chloe laughing with her friend about manipulating me, the deliberate cutting of the dress, and most disturbingly, what happened after I left. She had continued cutting the dress, making the damage more extensive, then carefully placed it in her laundry hamper. The audio picked up her voice clearly. Now I just need to tell Dad that Kate moved it from where I had it hanging and put it through the wash. He'll totally believe me over her. I sat back feeling strangely calm despite the hurt and anger swirling inside me. This wasn't an impulsive teenage mistake or a misunderstanding. This was calculated, premeditated manipulation designed to drive a wedge between David and me. Around noon, my phone exploded with texts from David saying Chloe had called him in tears from school. According to her story, she discovered that morning that her perfect prom dress had been damaged in the wash after I moved it from where she'd carefully hung it. When she confronted me about it, I'd allegedly told her coldly that she should have been more careful and would have to find something else or miss prom. The fabrication was breathtaking in its detail and malice. I replied simply, "That's not what happened. We should talk when you get home." David's response was immediate. "I'm coming home now." By the time David arrived 20 minutes later, he was already worked up from Chloe's tearful call. He burst through the door, his face flushed with anger. "How could you do this to her?" he demanded before I could even speak. "This is her senior prom, Kate. The one night she's been looking forward to all year." "David, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you're jealous of a teenager? That you can't stand seeing her happy?" "She told me how you've been acting weird ever since she got asked to prom." For the next hour, David unleashed years of pent-up frustration, accusing me of never trying to understand Chloe, of competing with her for his attention, of punishing her for not immediately accepting me. He brought up incidents from years ago, reframing them to fit this new narrative where I was the villain deliberately sabotaging his daughter's happiness. I listened in stunned silence, too hurt by his willingness to believe the worst of me to defend myself effectively. When he finally ran out of steam, breathing heavily in the middle of our living room, he demanded, "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" I looked at my husband, this man who had just revealed he didn't know me at all, who had never once in this tirade considered that his daughter might be lying, who had automatically assumed the worst of my character and intentions. "I'll show you tomorrow morning when we're both calmer," I said quietly. "Right now, neither of us is in a place to have a productive conversation." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" He shook his head in disgust. "Chloe's right. You don't even care. He slept in the guest room that night. I lay awake for hours, wondering how we had reached this point. When had our marriage become so fragile that a teenager's manipulation could shake its foundation so completely? Had David always trusted me so little? Or was it simply that his guilt over Chloe's mother leaving had created a blind spot where his daughter was concerned? This morning, I woke early after a restless night's sleep. I made coffee and waited at the kitchen table for David to emerge. When he finally appeared, disheveled and still visibly angry, I silently connected my laptop to our living room TV and played the security footage. David watched without speaking as his daughter deliberately destroyed her dress, laughed about manipulating me, and then looked directly into her phone camera and said, "My evil mother is going to pay for this. By tomorrow night, Dad will totally take my side, and she'll be buying me an even better dress while feeling guilty for being such a bleep." The color drained from David's face as he watched. I also showed him the receipt for the dress, $600, not the $350 he thought we'd spent, and the subsequent footage showing Chloe carefully cutting the dress more extensively after I'd left and placing it in the laundry hamper. When the footage ended, David sat in stunned silence, his coffee untouched and growing cold. "I've tried for 3 years, David," I said quietly. "I've never pushed, never tried to replace her mom, never complained when she was cold or rude. I keep thinking if I just hang in there, she'll eventually see I'm on her side. But I can't keep being the villain in her story. And I can't stay in a marriage where you automatically assume the worst of me without even asking for my side." David buried his face in his hands. "I don't know what to say." He finally managed, "I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. I heard her crying, and you wanted to protect her." I finished for him. "I understand that. But who protects me when the accusations are false? Who gives me the benefit of the doubt?" We talked for over an hour, more honestly than we had in years, about his guilt over Chloe's mother leaving, about my struggle to find my place in their established dynamic, about how his conflict avoidance had created an environment where Chloe never faced consequences for her actions. "I think I've been trying to make up for her mother's absence by never saying no, never setting boundaries," David admitted. "But I've just made things worse, haven't I?" "We both have," I acknowledged. "I've been so afraid of overstepping that I've let her behavior slide too many times. We've been enabling her instead of helping her grow." By the end of our conversation, David had resolved to address the situation directly with Chloe. No more avoidance. No more excuses about teenage phases. She was about to graduate high school and enter the adult world. It was time for real accountability. Chloe is at a friend's house now, but David is waiting in her room for her to come home. He's taken the day off work, something he rarely does, to have a long overdue conversation with his daughter when she returns. He's also arranged for family counseling, something I've suggested multiple times, but he's always resisted. I don't know if our marriage will survive this or if Chloe and I will ever have a genuine relationship. But for the first time in 3 years, I'm not carrying the weight of being the only one trying to make things work. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the conflict itself. It's standing alone while everyone assumes you're the problem. It's been 6 weeks since the dress incident, and our household has undergone a seismic shift. That afternoon, when Chloe came home and found her father waiting in her room, she initially tried to maintain her victim narrative. But when David quietly showed her the security footage on his tablet, her facade crumbled. What followed was a painful but necessary conversation between father and daughter. David didn't yell or lecture. Instead, he asked questions. Why did she feel the need to manipulate us? What was she hoping to accomplish? Did she understand the damage she was causing to our family? Chloe's answers revealed deeper issues than I had realized. Her resentment toward me wasn't simply about my replacing her mother's place in the home. It was about her fear that I was replacing her in her father's heart. Years of her mother's absence had created an unhealthy dynamic where Chloe saw herself as the most important woman in David's life, his primary focus. My arrival threatened that position. "I just wanted him to choose me," she admitted through tears. "Real ones this time. He always chooses you." David was stunned by this perception, which was so contrary to his own understanding of our family dynamics. From his perspective, he had always prioritized Chloe, often at the expense of our marriage. The disconnect between their perceptions was illuminating for all of us. The family counseling sessions David arranged began the following week. Dr. Bennett, our therapist, created a safe space for all three of us to express our perspectives without judgment. In those first few sessions, painful truths emerged from every direction. I admitted my resentment at always being cast as the villain despite my efforts to connect. David acknowledged his conflict avoidance and how it had enabled Chloe's worst behaviors. And Chloe, reluctantly at first, began to recognize how her mother's abandonment had shaped her reactions to me, seeing threats where none existed, interpreting normal boundaries as rejection, and using manipulation to maintain control. "Chloe, what you did with the dress wasn't just about a piece of clothing," Dr. Bennett explained during our third session. It was about power and control. You wanted to prove that you could turn your father against Kate, that your influence was stronger than hers. Chloe stared at the floor, uncomfortable with his characterization, but not denying it. The problem with that kind of manipulation, Dr. Bennett continued gently, is that it damages the very relationships you're trying to control. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. Those words seemed to affect Chloe deeply. Perhaps because they came from a neutral third party rather than from David or me, she was able to hear them without her usual defensiveness. As for the prom dress itself, that required a practical solution alongside the emotional work. The original dress was beyond repair, deliberately damaged beyond what could be fixed. Chloe had to face the consequences of her actions. You have two options, David told her after our second counseling session. You can use your savings to buy a new dress, or you can skip the prom. Those are the natural consequences of destroying something valuable. It was the first time in years I'd seen David hold a firm boundary with Chloe without immediately softening at her tears or complaints. It was a small step, but a significant one. Chloe chose to use her savings, money she'd been accumulating from her cafe job, to buy a used car after graduation. The dress she could afford wasn't as elaborate as the original emerald green one, but it was appropriate for prom. I offered to help alter it to fit her better, a peace offering that she accepted with surprising grace. The night of the prom arrived with less drama than I'd anticipated. Chloe looked beautiful in her modified dress, her hairstyle in an elegant updo that her friend's mother had helped with. As David took the obligatory pre-prom photos in our living room, I noticed Chloe glancing at me, not with her usual hostility, but with something more complex, perhaps a mixture of embarrassment and tentative respect. "You look lovely, Chloe," I said sincerely. "Thanks," she replied, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away for helping with the alterations to it. It would have looked weird without them. It wasn't a heartfelt apology or a dramatic reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, the first step towards something healthier between us. After Chloe left with her friends, David put his arm around me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on us even when I gave you every reason to." "We're still a work in progress," I reminded him. "But at least we're making progress now instead of just pretending everything's fine." The weeks since prom have brought small but significant changes. Chloe has been more respectful, if not warmly affectionate. She's attending her counseling sessions without the initial resistance, even beginning to explore her feelings about her mother's absence more deeply. David has been more attentive to our marriage, making time for us as a couple instead of focusing exclusively on Chloe. Last weekend, something unexpected happened. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Chloe approached, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. "Need any help?" she asked, surprising me. "Sure," I replied, trying not to make too big a deal of this unprecedented offer. "Could you chop these peppers?" We worked side by side for several minutes before Chloe spoke again. "I'm sorry about the dress," she said suddenly, her eyes fixed on the cutting board, "and not just because I got caught. It was a really messed up thing to do." I paused, recognizing the significance of this moment. "Thank you for saying that, Chloe. That means a lot to me. Dr. Bennett says I need to practice actually saying the words instead of just thinking I've apologized." She gave a small self-conscious laugh. "Apparently, my non-verbal apologies aren't as clear as I think they are." "That's good advice," I acknowledged. "Communication is usually better when it's explicit." "Yeah. Well," she shrugged, already reaching the limit of her emotional comfort zone. "Anyway, I'm sorry." "Apology accepted," I said simply, not wanting to overwhelm her with my own emotional response. We continued preparing dinner together, the silence between us comfortable for perhaps the first time in our 3 years of knowing each other. Later that evening, David found me reading in our bedroom. "Did something happen with Chloe today?" he asked. "She seems different." I told him about our conversation in the kitchen. It was brief, but it felt genuine. He sat beside me on the bed, taking my hand. "You know, when her mother left, I was terrified I wouldn't be enough for her, that I'd mess up and damage her somehow. I think I've been so focused on not being a failure as a single dad that I failed to see how my choices were affecting our marriage. We're all doing the best we can," I said, squeezing his hand, "and now we're learning to do better." This morning, Chloe left a note on the kitchen counter before leaving for school. "Kate, thanks for helping me study for my lit final yesterday. Your notes made the themes actually make sense." See, it wasn't a dramatic declaration of affection or a complete transformation of our relationship, but it was acknowledgement, appreciation, and perhaps the beginning of respect. After 3 years of being cast as the wicked stepmother in her narrative, being seen as a helpful presence felt like a significant victory. I don't harbor illusions that our challenges are over. Chloe graduates in 2 weeks and then begins the transition to college life. New phases bring new challenges and family dynamics don't transform overnight. But for the first time, I feel like we're all facing in the same direction, working toward a healthier family system rather than pulling against each other. Dr. Bennett told us in our last session that blended families take an average of 7 years to fully integrate. You're not behind schedule, she assured us. You're just in the middle of a normal, if difficult, process. 7 years. We're not even halfway there. But now, at least, the journey feels possible. Not easy, but possible. And sometimes, that's enough to keep moving forward. David just texted to say he's taking us all out to dinner tonight to celebrate Chloe's last final exam. Once, I would have braced myself for an evening of tension and carefully navigated conversational landmines. Today, I'm simply looking forward to a family meal with all its imperfect but honest interactions. Progress, not perfection. That's becoming our family motto.